know what? Before the 2008 Olympics, in the last weeks of that, my dinner consisted of white rice, lettuce leaves, and sparkling water just to fill my tummy. So when I toed the line in Beijing, my body fat percentage was just under 3%. And it was all about being light, because at that time the run really decided. The bike was still quite neglected. That phase only came afterwards where the bike was really attacked, it became a dominant factor. And so it was all about being light. And I believed in my mind that I needed to be light. And that was more a belief thing, actually, than a factually based kind of looking at what would be the best for performance. So it was a very much old school way of approaching it. And, my weight in the off season fluctuated by almost 10% that I put on within a very short time after the season. And, you can imagine it's not a very healthy thing to do. It's not a very sustainable thing to do. And to be quite frank, it almost made me retire, because I love food, I love eating. And that's one of the best things about doing long distance triathlon. You burn enough calories that really it's easy to eat well and maintain a good weight. So probably I'm probably 5 kilos heavier than I was during my Olympic phase. My body fat percentage is a little bit higher, but I'm still in the mid range of the single digits. So somewhere between 6 and 8%, but it's just where I naturally fall, and that's kind of a genetic thing, I guess. But there's a fair bit more muscle mass there, and there's a fair bit more happiness there, simply because, well, as Oscar Wilde said, the first thing you lose on a diet is your good mood. And I was certainly cranky a lot in those days, trying to, just fight for a racing weight.
And so, what does maybe, in contrast to the white rice and lettuce and sparkling water, what is the sort of 3 days leading into an Ironman look like for you now?
Well, these days I have a fairly balanced diet. So really, I don't even change much leading into a race. The only thing I do leading into a race that I change is I go down to 1 coffee a day, simply to wind down my nervous system and also get in as much sleep as I can during the day. I enjoy a coffee, so I really wouldn't go down to not having any coffee. But in general, I eat high fat, I eat high carb, and I eat a decent amount of protein. So,
alrighty guys, a very warm welcome to another video. So that was a very short snippet from a Zoom interview or meeting that Jan Frodeno did with Super Sapiens. And he was touching there on his extreme diet before the Beijing Olympics. Obviously, it worked out quite well for him. However, getting down to those lower body mass percentages of, in the few percents, 3, 4, 5%, extremely deleterious generally to health and well-being, particularly hormone health, particularly recovery, sleep, everything that we want to focus on when we're looking to optimize health in general. So this is going to the opposite extreme of going extreme low or very low body fat. So one thing that's quite good is that Jan mentions and touches on the fact that it was never sustainable to maintain such low body fat percentages. He would then kind of go up in body fat percentage and fluctuate during the off season. But this is one thing that is a issue with endurance athletes, particularly female athletes, but also very much in male athletes as well. And so what is a healthy body percentage for a male athlete? Well, I think anywhere in the realm of, it's very individual and very dependent on your genetics, anything in the realm of 10 to 15, 20% even. I'd say once you're going over 15%, you're probably exceeding what you otherwise need. But generally, going into the under, 10%, and a general consensus in the medical community, this will vary a little bit. There's some debate around it, but generally around 5% body fat is where, and below, is where we start to get into issues, particularly around hormone health, adequate hormone function, etc. I'd argue that it's probably even below 10% for some people, maybe even higher for other people. So it's very genetic, and it's very individualized, or it's very individual the actual effect that super low body fats relative to you are going to have on your hormones and overall performance and everything else involved. So 5% body fat generally, like I said, this will vary, is at least at a minimum important for hormone function. So going below that, we're going to be compromised. Testosterone will drop. Alongside testosterone dropping, as a byproduct, you're also going to have reduced sperm count, reduced libido, reduced energy, motivation, and drive. Growth hormone will take a hit, as well as IGF-1, which is almost a proxy for growth hormone. Not a direct measure. We need more specific tests to actually measure the growth hormone response or the body's capacity to produce it, etc. But IGF-1 is a good proxy for those anabolic pathways that growth hormone does induce. Thyroid will take a hit as well. When you chronically restrict, and I've got on that second point there, REDS, so that's relative energy deficit or deficiency syndrome. Essentially, this is when we are relatively not replacing the calories that our body needs in order to recover from the exercise that we're doing or the general stresses and demands that we're doing and putting ourselves under. So what happens when you train? Obviously, you're inducing a stress on the body, and that training stimulus is highly stressful. Coupled with that, many athletes also have the additional high stress of chronic under-eating or under-fueling, which is perceived as the body as just another stress because we're not getting the adequate micro, but mostly macronutrients, so carbohydrates, proteins, fats, in order to replenish what we've used generally. And therefore, it's going to be another stress on the body in and of itself. And when you cut calories too low, couple that with training, your thyroid is going to absolutely get smashed. So TSH will probably go up, but what you'll really see is a reduction in your free T3, which is your active thyroid hormone, T4 as well. And this is going to induce a whole range of symptoms. You're going to be tired, have some brain fog, even some depressive or low mood symptoms, trouble sleeping sometimes, with then excessive sleepiness, weight gain even. And this is coupled with cortisol, which is our more direct stress hormone, which is going to elevate during this whole process of under-eating, over-restricting. So what's important to note is that Jan never did this long-term, and he generally sits at a very low body fat percentage throughout the year, even in the off season. So that kind of set point of body mass percentage, that's really determined by genetics. Also, it's determined by like a large portion of it is diet, training, lifestyle, but certain genetics will make it easier for certain athletes to maintain a low body fat percentage and not have necessarily all these consequences of that. But going to something like 3% body fat, that's not going to be sustainable. And he mentions that. So obviously it was a short-term thing. It was a short-term restriction, and then he kind of went back up afterwards. But you really want to avoid long-term calorie restriction with training, because training is a stress. You have other stresses, particularly if you're not a professional triathlete. But even professional triathletes have media, they have commitments, they have contracts. Any athletes, they're going to be stressed. But particularly an age grouper or an everyday athlete who's doing it as a hobby or for enjoyment, you've got many, many stresses in your life, and you do not want to be coupling under eating with overtraining, or even just normal training with under eating, because they're both going to compound and 1 + 1 = 3. So this is where we get into a hole. So our hormones are going to take a big hit. With that, of course, reduced bone density, reduced recovery, all that kind of stuff. The immune system will become compromised if we're chronically under eating and too low body fat percentage. So we do need a baseline body fat. It doesn't need to be massively high, but we certainly need body fat to maintain a optimally functioning immune system. So, you're going to be more susceptible to colds, viruses, recurrent illness, generally run down and feeling a bit average. Sleep quality is going to take a hit. Why is this? Well, this is mainly because of the hormonal impact and also the drive that we intrinsically have with ghrelin, leptin, these hunger satiety hormones, coupled with cortisol being elevated, which is going to put us in a fight or flight or a tired but wired kind of state. So sleep quality will take a hit because the body naturally is like, where's the food? We need to go out. We need to go forage in the forest for fruits from the tree, or we need to go hunt, or whatever we need to do. We need to eat. This is not good. So sleep quality will take a hit, and then performance and recovery obviously will take a hit if this is done in the long term. So Jan never did this in the long term, but even in the long run, he's still maintaining very low body fat percentages, and it's incredible to hear him say that, you know, he's gone up a fair few body fat percentage when he went to Ironman and was winning KONA, because he was so lean at those events, so skinny. So, you know, very real consequences of overtraining, under eating, but realize that under eating in and of itself is going to very much induce similar symptoms and hormonal profiles as overtraining in and of itself. And you couple them, you're going down an absolute disaster of a hole. So, and even look, like Christian Blumenfeld, for example, has openly stated that he, and this is kind of paraphrasing and putting it in my own interpretation, his whole philosophy is make training the stress that we have, or that he has in his life, that, you know, really focus in on the training, and then the food, the diet, the recovery, all of that stuff should not be an additional stress. So eating maybe even a little bit more than he needs, but ensuring he's getting good quality training in and supporting that, and really, I guess, safeguarding himself. No one's fully safeguarded against chronic fatigue or overtraining, etc. But if you're certainly replacing what you've been using in terms of calories, you know, you really are doing the best thing you can to avoid REDS, or relative energy deficiency syndrome. So, you know, a very interesting thing to talk about, a very, I guess, you know, common problem. If we extrapolate this out to female athletes, is going to result very much in similar symptoms, but there's also going to be a loss of menses or menstruation because of the reduction in estrogen, also the reduction in testosterone, which is super important for women as well, and all of these other things, thyroid, cortisol, etc. And you really want to avoid this state, and the best way to do that is to not go down the path or lead down that path in general. And my best advice would be, if you really have a key targeted event that you absolutely feel like it's necessary to strip a couple of body fat percentages than you're otherwise training at and naturally sit at, only ever do it once or twice a year and cap it at that. Because if you're chronically trying to drop body fat, chronically, you're just smashing the body, and you're putting so much stress on it that isn't even a stress induced by training, which is going to actually help you become a better athlete. So I guess, again, cutthroat nature of professional sports, you need to be skinny to be running these times. Generally, there are outliers, as we know. But yeah, nonetheless, leave your comments. Have you ever suffered from REDS? Have you ever suffered from overtraining, chronic fatigue, under eating, hormonal issues related to it? Please leave a comment. Very interested to know your experiences, your recovery from that, or generally how you avoid that. So take care, guys. Hopefully that was some not very interesting, but hopefully that was some interesting information for you. And I will see everyone in the next video.